The Multimedia Ninja Podcast, episode 48. Hello again, and welcome to the Multimedia Ninja Podcast, where it's all about surviving and thriving in the digital convergence. My name is Bradford Rogers, and I'll be interviewing some multimedia ninjas who are making things happen in their respective fields and sharing tips, tools, and insights for multimedia artists and content creators. As always, you can find show notes at themultimedianinja.com. This week, Zen of video and photo shooting. As you may know, in this podcast series, my friends and I will be talking about all things multimedia, including creativity, shaping your ideas, and how to be more productive doing it, regardless of what kind of content you're creating. We have got an exciting episode for you today, so what do you say we just let's get to it? Well, hey there. Welcome to another edition of the Multimedia Ninja Podcast. I'm extremely pleased that you decided to come back and join us. This week's episode is called The Zen of Video and Photo Shooting. I'll be talking a little bit about Zen, mindfulness, and certain things, and you can actually go back and also how it applies to video and photo, which we've been doing a lot of lately, right, Sis? And also you can go back to episode number 3, which is audio only, and you get to that by going to themultimedianinja.com/3, and that will take you to episode number 3, where we talked about Zen a little bit before in one of our first episodes, obviously, audio only, and there's some good stuff on there, and you can get into a Zen sort of mindset by just listening to the audio if you're normally a YouTube video listener. So again, this is Zen and video and photo shooting. I'd like to thank everybody who has helped us get to almost 10,000 downloads. You've really been helpful, and I've been seeing also how much keeping a consistent release schedule each Friday has been to contributing to this growth. And I appreciate everybody who has commented, thumbs up on YouTube, left ratings on iTunes, and done all that kind of good stuff. I really appreciate you. And I did want to let you know that you can now actually subscribe to the Multimedia Ninja email newsletter right there at themultimedianinja.com, which will give you not only what's coming up each week, but also some interesting news and a lot of cool resources and exclusive stuff that you would not otherwise be getting or not be getting quite as soon as the people who are in the tribe on the email list. To that end, I did want to get to our segment we call Winners and Losers, which is, well, pretty self-explanatory. But our first winners this week are Renee, Deanna, and John. Winner! Who were the first 3 people to sign up to the email list. Thank them very much. And by the way, when you go to themultimedianinja.com or any page therein, you should, if you scroll down in the show notes to any extent, I think about 17% down, you will see a little scroll bar pop up, come up the side. I tried to make it one that's not covering the whole content. That seems really annoying. And it should go away. I repeat, should go away once you have subscribed, or it will go away once you click the little X to close it. And if you haven't subscribed, it should remind you gently in a few days the next time you come back to the site. I would greatly appreciate you letting me know, and Renee and Deanna already have given me feedback on that, which was a result of my question in the newsletter. And I have tweaked that, and I hope that plugin, which is by Mail Munch, which is something that works with WordPress and our Aweber email. Hopefully that is configured so that it will only nag you at first, will go away once you subscribe, and will also go away if you just tell it to go away for several days, and then when you come back to visit the site, it will go, hey. So that's what we wanted to do with that. And again, Deanna and Renee and John are our first 3 winners for this week. I also, as another winner, I wanted to credit the application called Headspace.
Winner!
That goes with our topic this week on Zen and video and photo shooting. More on the Zen side is Headspace, because it is an application for your iPhone and iPad and probably Android as well, which is a guided meditation application. I was over at Silent Sound the other day, more on that perhaps in a minute, but TK over there, who's mixed the Timothy P. Green record and such, I was telling him about Headspace, and he said, so how do you meditate when somebody is talking to you? What's this guided meditation? And my short answer was it actually over time gets to be pretty minimal. And I was wondering that myself before I tried it. And I'm certainly far from being a full-fledged New Age kind of guy. I would generally characterize myself more in the Mr. Spock, Sheldon Cooper category. But I did find that it jibed with a lot of my common sense ideas on Zen and mindfulness. And we'll get a little bit more to that later. But once again, Headspace is another winner of this week.
Winner!
And once again, our loser is Comcast for obvious reasons.
Loser.
A lot been going on this last week, actually a couple of weeks. We did the episode with Kevin Leahy last week, and I definitely encourage you to go back and check it out. He is not only a drummer, continuing our musical recording academy theme, but a web developer. And I did want to get a brief break from all the musical Grammy season sort of oriented stuff, because obviously not everybody listening is a musician. This whole multimedia ninja thing spans audio production, video production, photography, videography. I said, that goes in video production, writing and blogging, graphic design, all that kind of good stuff, because the whole premise that I started out with, and I'm really glad that people have agreed with it appears, is that in this particular day and age, it really pays, even if you're, say, a musician, or if you're a writer, or if you're a photographer, really pays to have some of these other skills that we're talking about, whether it's web design, being able to deploy a WordPress site, any of that kind of stuff, to really help you get yourself out there. Even if you're a musician, you may think, well, I don't need video to show my audio. But frankly, people tend to listen with their eyes a lot, and you want to not leave anything on the table, off the table, one of those things. So it definitely pays, and it's paying now for me, I must say. I'm not exactly rich, but I am busy, rather busy these last couple of weeks. So I did a little shoot for, first of all, for a certain recording studio who got a new piano, for whom I'd already done their website, which again is a whole nother discipline, as I mentioned. And once you start doing some stuff, sometimes folks want you to do some more stuff, and that's really good. In addition to that, in between playing with renovating the studio here, which we've put in some speed rails, they call them, which are actually like 1.5-inch pipes that are pipes hanging from the ceiling, which seems like a really easy thing to do, but it was not. We had our good friend, Mr. Alan Rice, come in and prep the ceiling so that we could hang all these things safely in here. The upshot was that I wanted to try and leave things kind of set up for the now weekly video podcast so that I don't have a bunch of crap on the floor as far as light stands and all that kind of good stuff, where I can put a green screen or seamless white backdrop back here if we want to do a little bit of that. And we have some speed rails back there where we can hang that and have it ready. Just pull it down, all that kind of good stuff. In addition, my computer seems to be getting senile. Both of them. And here's a good tip for you multimedia ninjas out there. It appears, from what I am learning, and what actually our guest Matt Still told me quite a while back, that solid state drives are awesome and they're fast, But apparently compared to rotational regular drives that are a spinning platter, and part of this is from Matt, part of this I've learned subsequently and come to believe, but these SSDs are apparently, once they start going bad, you can have a bad sector on the traditional rotating drive, but once you start getting bad sectors on the solid state drive, they just really go into a bad place. And also, it appears that the effect of having not enough free space left on your solid state drive can have much more of a very bad, deep, dark impact on your performance of your computer than it would be on a rotational drive. I'm not sure quite why that is, but multiple sources seem to indicate that's so. And unfortunately, my laptop here, the MacBook Pro, has almost no free space. The solid state drive is just about to be dead, and it's starting to do bad things like forget that Adobe Premiere is installed, forget that other things are installed, or that I have permission to open them, and all that good sort of thing. So I'm actually waiting for hopefully a Thursday shipment from Otherworld Computing to bring me 2 more solid-state drives for this baby, which would be 2 2-terabyte drives. Yes, 2 2-terabyte drives, giving it 4 terabytes of solid-state storage in the MacBook Pro, God willing. Meanwhile, I upgraded to Ableton Live Suite 9, which I'm recording this podcast on, and very excited about that. And I got the Ableton Push 2 controller. So we are using and getting ready to use even more the heck out of that for the Timothy P. Green live performances and all kind of other stuff. I'm really enjoying Ableton Suite 9 and Ableton Push. And I'll just, for you audio junkies, I will say one of my favorite ideas, because I haven't tried it, but I'm told it works grand, is on the new Ableton Live 9. You can actually transfer, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, change audio into MIDI to MIDI. Yes, so you can take chorded instruments even like guitar or keys or vocal lines or a flute line, what have you, and Ableton or drums, and Ableton will turn those into MIDI. So even if it's a pitched, say, flute line or synth or whatever, it will basically find the notes and turn those into MIDI notes, which you can play back then on whatever sound you like. Of course, if there's pitch bends, you may have to tweak it a little bit, and there's a little work as always involved in these things. The machines aren't perfect, but that is pretty darned awesome in my book. So if all of that and doing the photo shoot at the studio that I mentioned with the new piano weren't enough, we also migrated the Multimedia Ninja site to siteground.com, which is a hosting service. And as you may or may not be familiar, I used to use Bluehost, I'm indicating the blue shirt, and I actually was an affiliate of them for a minute before I decided that their service, in my opinion, basically sucked. The downtime and the slow time was not good. The site loading speed was not good, and that is critical because you don't want to have a slow loading page or site. It just makes people back out and go somewhere else, which is not what you want them to do. So far, I am quite happy with SiteGround, and I can tentatively recommend them, and I hope to be able to strongly recommend them soon. They may fall into the winner category soon. We shall see about that. Finally, we did a shoot at Pine Lake, the city of Pine Lake here in Georgia. Last weekend, they had the Pine Lake Festival, and my trusty, long-suffering assistant, Sis, kindly went and assisted me with getting some shots of the festival and a flash mob that they had, which was quite interesting. They did a little thing where the people started dancing, and they had a lady come out as Prince and do some dancing with an inflatable guitar. And then the cops pretended to come, Pine Lake Cops, which is a small Police Department. Used to be known for their speed traps. I think they're upping their PR and have been a little different, hopefully, of the last few years, but seemed like nice enough people. They came down and pretended to break up the flash mob, which was kind of cool, and then they started dancing with the flash mob. So there you go. But my main purpose, aside from that, was to be down there and capture a bunch of the local artists, visual, sculptural, that kind of artists, and that I did with the help of a Edelkrone slider. That leads me to our segment called What the Heck Are You Doing? And in this case, what I am doing, and let me back up and tell you that segment, as you may be familiar from the past, is each week where we ask the guest, or in this case myself, what piece of hardware or software or tip or trick or philosophy or approach or what have you is really rocking hard for you this week. And for me, what is really working for me this week is the slider. So sliders, I can tell you that they are, if you haven't seen them, it's kind of hard to describe what they do for your camera. If you're watching the video, then you're now seeing an example of that. If you're listening on audio, you can imagine some of these product shots, or maybe where you're seeing, say, a lady with chocolates through the bookcase. This is something I've actually seen for a chocolates commercial. Maybe it's just a lady at that point. But anyway, it was a chocolates commercial. And the shot was through a bookcase, and you see the person, but the camera is sliding smoothly past the other side of the books, and as it passes this opening between the books, you see the subject, in this case the lady, who is a chocolate lover, through the gap in the books. So a slider is a mechanical device that you place your camera on, and it slides down the tracks from one side to the other to give you a hopefully buttery smooth shot, which is akin to what you would have on a larger scale with a dolly. So there you go. That would be a slider. So that is what is rocking hard for me this week, and what I hope to be using a lot more of soon. So I mentioned earlier on about Headspace, the application, and I can actually just show you, hopefully, Headspace on my mobile device here. For the video version, if you're on the audio version, you will not see this. There we go. Actually, there's a couple of screens. You can see it has my stats on there and all that kind of thing. 60 days in a row that I've been using Headspace. Gives you your little run streak, which is kind of contrary to the whole goal-less idea of mindfulness type of meditation and all that, but that's okay. You can find Headspace at headspace.com. I will actually put a little link in the show notes. If you go through the show notes link, what it is about, in case you're wondering what the heck I was talking about, is Headspace is a guided meditation program. And what it's about, what the whole Zen thing is about, which we're getting into in a moment, is what they call mindfulness. I've seen everything, even like police departments, speaking of police departments, doing mindfulness training. And well, that may sound a little frou-frou, maybe it is, I don't know. But the thing is, and this is why this whole Zen thing really figures in well with the Multimedia Ninja, is that when you're a multimedia ninja, you need to have this diversity of skills to really make it work, to have a career out of it. And there is a huge benefit to having this diversity in skills, in that, if you're down in photography, if you're not having a lot of that, maybe you have a lot of audio production work coming to you. I found this in my previous gig as a multimedia for litigation vendor. When you have one department that's down, like videotaping, you may have more demand in your graphic design department. So the diversity is really good. On the other hand, there is a downside. The peril of being a multimedia ninja is that you have all this juggling to do. You have all these different skills of different types, even though they may be related, to keep in mind. And what happens sometimes is that you start getting a lot of activity in the brain that is I don't want to say frantic, but unproductive. You can have a lot of trying to think about what you're going to do next while you're doing this thing, or trying to think about how you're going to do a whole different type of skill or product while you're working on a different thing. And sometimes you're not able to batch things, which, by the way, I think I also discussed in episode 3 or 2. Batching is very good. Sometimes you can't really do that, and it leads to a certain sort of frenetic feeling and approach, and which can be not helpful, not productive, does not always contribute to rapid production of quality work. And the skill that you need to cultivate to counteract this is the skill of mindfulness. Oh. To counteract this whole frenetic thing, you need to learn how to focus on what you are doing right now, right here, in this case, trying to record a podcast without stumbling, but focus on what you're doing right now and giving all your attention to that without this internal chatter. And I assume almost everybody listening knows exactly what I mean by internal chatter. It's if you've ever tried to just focus on one thing and you find that your mind is thinking about what I need to get on groceries, or, oh, I forgot to send a condolence letter to so-and-so, or I forgot to take the trash out, or I need to pay this bill. When you get a certain amount of all that going on in your mind, it kind of distracts you from what you really need to be doing. And so this mindfulness training, which is one way, I think, what Headspace calls itself, and a lot of, you've heard of maybe transcendental meditation. That's a little more on the yogi and disciple sort of path than this Headspace, which is kind of and I'm not saying one is better than the other. There's Zen Buddhism and Zen traditional practice. There's just paying attention to your breath, which is incorporated in Headspace. And at any rate, particularly in my experience with Headspace and my readings before, you're trying to do is focus on something like the breath. In some cases, you are repeating a certain sound or what have you. But the whole idea, in other cases, I should mention, I'm grabbing a prop here, you're trying to focus on something just like a small stone. And here's the thing, whether you're trying to focus on your breath or a small stone or something like that, I challenge you, take something like a stone which has no special significance to you, just an object that, not a pen, which might signify work or whatever, just a little pebble from outside like this one. And I challenge you just to be able to look at that for 30 seconds and do nothing but see the stone without your mind wandering. This is kind of what this whole practice is getting at. I promise you are going to have quite a challenge, unless you are really special, with being able to just look at something and see it and not have anything else in mind. Very, very challenging. And that's the discipline that you can build, though, to try and relax your mind, not trying to drive away thoughts, but just letting them come and go. And to kind of paraphrase Headspace, as if you're watching a train or a bunch of cars on the freeway or something. The thoughts come and go. You're not trying to squash them. You're not beating yourself up for having thoughts that are distractions, but you're understanding that they're just distractions, and you are letting them come and go, and you are coming back to the focus on whatever, your breath, the task at hand, what have you. So that's a really brief summation of Headspace and the mindfulness training. So that was On the Dreprung Roof, if I'm pronouncing it right, by our friend Mr. Steve Dance, who is our guest in episode 2. And you can check that out, obviously, at themultimedianinja.com/2. Great guy, and apropos of all this Zen stuff, he actually went to Tibet and made a movie, and contributed to a book and some music called Sacred Sites of the Dalai Lamas, which is very cool. So go back and check that out. But without further ado, let's get into our 3 Zen principles for the day. First of all, you can go back again to episode 3. I think I mentioned this a little, but let me touch on it in a slightly different way. One of the traditional tenets of Zen, is less is more. Very important point in almost every artistic discipline, especially in video and photos, but again, in just about everything: writing, music, photo, video, web design, graphic design, you name it. The concept of less is more almost universally applies. Sometimes more is more, but more often than not, people try and glop extra stuff onto their creation in order to try and make it stand up. And if it doesn't stand up, whether it's audio, video, photo composition, with fewer elements, then it is probably not a strong construction to begin with. It should stand up on its own if it's a strong construction to begin with. And generally, having a little space in it, having fewer components, allows people to focus on the important components. So in the case of photography and videography, sometimes this might mean decluttering and cleaning up your environment. Sometimes you can't help it. You're at a festival, say, like Pine Lake Festival or whatever, and you have all these people and stalls and booths and things going on, and some of it is really cool and artistic. Some of it you don't necessarily need in there. In that case, one thing you can do is use a large aperture on your camera or video camera to cause bokeh, which is where your subject is in focus and the stuff in front and behind them are significantly out of focus, which is a very cool effect. You can overdo it as well, but generally speaking, this is one way to keep from having too much stuff going on in your shot, which can be really distracting when you're trying to focus on the subject. Another place where less is more really applies is in your time management and project management, and sometimes the ability to say or think no is the most important thing you can do, and having a sense of doing less on your project. And for an example of what I mean here, today I really wanted to use the new slider with its automatic mechanical things to go behind the audio speaker over there, and just like I was talking about with the little slider bookcase shot, I could set that thing up to automatically pan back and track back and forth as I'm doing this podcast. However, and it would be a really sexy shot, I promise you, but I have not had a time to mess with that. I need to get this podcast out, so that's going to be something we do later on. So you really need to pick and choose. There are other things I wanted to do on this podcast, which I'm not going to do because we need to get a podcast out on Friday. And if you just keep doing things, you're going to find yourself late on Thursday or early on Friday for that 6 a.m. release, and you have to render all of your video once you've edited it, and you are just in a world of pain in that case if you didn't kind of finish it in time. So just remember, less is more. One other thing which is kind of related is to think of things from a different angle. And sometimes in the terms of video and photo, that could be very literal. For example, the Pine Lake shoot the other day, I found out that we did not have a raised stage that was going to be significantly over the audience doing this flash mob thing. And so we needed a ladder because we wanted to get a shot up above the crowd looking down so that we just didn't have a bunch of people in our way, which is often the case. And I kicked myself because I had to borrow a ladder from our friend Diane to make sure we could get that shot. It should be one of the first things you want to think about when you're a photographer is doing things from a different angle, not just head height taking photos, doing some low angle things, which we did at the festival with some setting the slider down on the ground, again, getting up on the ladder for some of the flash mob stuff, but thinking of taking shots from a different angle. And you can also apply that metaphorically, easy for me to say, metaphorically to your audio and music production, that sort of thing, thinking of things from a different angle. And I wanted to mention also metaphorically the book and the book Creative, A Whack on the Side of the Head is the book by Roger Van Ock, Oeoech, I believe. And he has a book a whack on the side of the head, which we referenced in episode 11 about creativity with Mr. Timothy P. Green. I can just tell you that part of what he is teaching in that book is creativity, but approaching and being creative by looking at things differently and preparing yourselves to look at things from a different angle. And I can't recommend that book highly enough. Once again, not being compensated for that endorsement, but I did make a link on our site. If you just go to themultimedianinja.com/whack, WHACK, not whack, but whack. Whack, as Stewie would say. Whack, whack. That will take you to the Amazon page for Mr. Van Ock's books and Kindle books and all that good stuff. He also has some cool products like the Creative Whack Ball, I think it's called. It's like a hard to explain. Maybe later for that. I think that is actually a picture of that on episode 11, the Creative Whack Ball. Ball of Wax, I think it's called. Those things, unfortunately, I couldn't get Mr. Van Ock's own site to load at all. In order to link to that, when that seems to be fixed, we'll do that. But note to self, page that doesn't load, not doing you any good. Oh. So my final Zen thing I just wanted to get to was, and this very much applies to the whole Headspace, the mindfulness training, and the whole practice of Zen and meditation, the tradition of Zen. It's one of the really cool features. It's be in the moment. So one of the things you're trying to do with the Zen practice or the mindfulness practice is to fully enjoy what you're doing and fully participate in it, which is whether it's making a podcast, eating scrambled eggs, walking. There's an old Zen saying, I think it says, when sitting, just sit. When walking, just walk. I think I am butchering that. It was something like that, but that pretty much distills the whole essence. There was another example, it may be by Alan Watts, who's a sort of a modern Zen proselytizer, something like that. But talking about how a lot of people get so, and this describes me and probably you in some cases to a T, you're trying to not just taste your food when you're eating a delicious meal, you're having this meta level of trying to make sure that you fully appreciate the tasting that you are doing of the delicious meal. And, can I maximize that by reading a book at the same time or watching cable news or what have you? Just enjoy the thing that you're doing. So this applies to photo and video as well in the certain sense that you may come to a photo or video shoot with certain preconceived ideas about what you want to do technically, lighting-wise, composition-wise, what have you, and things, tools that you want to use, and you may get to it, and you may find that the client wants to do something you think is crazy, or the client just wants to do something you think neutral or great, but it's different than what you wanted to do, or you find the circumstances have prevented you from doing what you planned to do. What you should do is be in the moment and be open to what is being given to you. Think of it in a positive way. Think of what you can do with it and consider going along that path that has been presented to you. Maybe you wanted to do a single overhead light portrait thing and you discovered for some reason that wasn't feasible. I don't know why that would be, but hey, maybe you want to do a traditional 3-point setup or something, or vice versa. But the key is when you get to a situation and what you had planned is not going to happen, go with the flow and go with what has presented itself to you, if at all possible, or think about it, see if there's a way for that to be possible, to work with what you're given. And you can't do that unless you are present and you are there in the moment and you are open to what is presented to you. Well, I think that just about wraps up another edition of The Multimedia Ninja for this week. I hope you'll come back next week and bring your friends. Don't forget you can subscribe to not only the podcast, but the new email list at themultimedianinja.com. I definitely encourage you to go out and apply some of these Zen principles we've been talking about. Be in the moment. think of things from a different angle, and less is more. I hope you'll go out and do some great things this week, and we'll see you next time.